3. Norik raised his head, screaming before he knew he had awakened. A chill wind snapped him to full consciousness. For the first time, he noticed the intense pain in his right cheek. Without thinking much, he put a hand to that cheek. Cold metal brushed his skin. With a start, Norik looked at the hand. A hand clothed in crimson gauntlet, a reddish liquid now staining the fingertips. Blood. With great trepidation, he returned his hand to his cheek, touching the flesh with one finger now. By that means, Norik discovered that he bled in 3 places. 3 valleys had been gouged in his cheek, as if some animal had clawed him. A flash of memory sent shivers through the veteran. Satan's face contorted in fear, not witnessed by Norik outside of the most horrible battlefield. Satan's eyes pleading, his mouth open, but no more words escaping. Satan's hand tearing desperately at his friend's face. It could not be as Norik remembered it. Another image. Watson on the floor of the tomb, blood pooling on the stones nearby. Its source, the gaping hole where the Vajrai's throat had once been. The sorcerer, at least, had died relatively quickly. Growing more horrified by the moment, the half-mad soldier struggled to his feet. Around him, he noticed tall hills, even mountains, and the first glimmers of sunlight. Yet none of them looked at all familiar. None of them at all resembled the peak in which he and his friends had discovered the tomb of Bartek. Norik took a step forward, trying to get his bearings. An unsettling creaking accompanied by every motion. Norik looked down to discover that not only his hands were clad in metal, armor. Everywhere he stared, Norik only saw the same blood-colored metal plates. He had thought that his shock and horror could not possibly grow any worse. But simply gazing at the rest of his body nearly threw the formerly steady soldier into complete panic. His arms, his torso, his legs, the same crimson armor now hid all. To add to the mockery, Norik saw that even wore Bartek's ancient but still serviceable leather boots. Bartek, warlord of blood. Bartek, whose dark magic had apparently saved the helpless soldier at the price of Satan and the sorcerer's lives. Gazing down at his hands again, Norik tore at the gauntlets. He tugged as hard as he could on the first, the left, then the right. Yet regardless of which, Norik sought to remove, the metal gloves slid no more than an inch before seeming to catch. He peered within and, after seeing no impediment, tried once more, but still the gauntlets would not come off. Worse, as the sun rose, for the first time Norik could see that the blood from his injured cheek had not been the only stains upon the metal. Each finger, even most of each palm, looked as if it had been bathed in rich red dye. But it was not dye that covered them. With a roar of outrage, Norik swung one fist at the nearest rock, perfectly willing to break every bone in his hand, if only it would mean the release of his hand. Instead, though, the rock itself gave way in part, the only damage to Norik being a violent throbbing throughout his entire arm. He dropped to his knees. The wind howled, seeming to mock him. Norik remained where he was, head cast down, arms dangling. Fragments of what had happened in the tomb flashed through his mind, each painting a scene most diabolic. Satan and Watson, both dead. both dead by his hands. Norik's head jerked up again, not exactly by his hands. The damn gauntlets, one of which had saved him from the ghoulish sentinels. But done this, Norik still blamed himself for much of those deaths. For perhaps he might have altered matters if he had removed the first gauntlet immediately, but by himself he would have never have slaughtered his friends. There had to be a way to remove the gloves, even if he had to peel them off piece by piece, taking some of the skin off with the metal. Determined to do something for himself, the veteran fighter rose again, trying to better identify his surroundings. Unfortunately, he saw little more now than he had on first glance. Mountains and hills, forests stretching to the north, no sign of habitation, not even a distant plume of smoke. And again, nothing resembling the peak in which Bartok's tomb lay. Broke off quickly, uneasy at even mentioning the dark and supposedly mythic realm. Even as a child, and certainly as a soldier, Norik had never believed much in either demons or angels, but the horror to which he had been a part had changed some of his opinions. Whether or not demons and angels truly existed, the Warlord of Blood had certainly left a monstrous legacy, a legacy in which Norik hoped to rid himself of quickly, hoping that perhaps he had simply been too upset the first time he had tried to remove the gauntlets. Norik tried to inspect them again in yet greater detail. However, as he looked down, he made yet another horrific discovery. Not only did blood soil the gloves, but did so the breastplate too. Worse, on closer study, Norik saw that the blood had not accidentally splattered the armor, but had been purposefully and methodically spread across it. Again, he shuddered, quickly returning to the gauntlets. He sought some latch, some catch, even some dent that might have caused the gloves to stick. Nothing. Nothing held the gauntlets fast. By rights, they should have slid off his hands with a simple shake towards the ground. The armor. If he could not remove the gauntlets, surely he can unfasten the other pieces. Some had catches, readily seen, and even with the gauntlets, he surely would have that much trouble undoing them. Other pieces would not have any catches, having been simply designed to slide on and off. Bending down, Norik tried one leg. He fumbled at the catches at first, then saw how best to secure his hold. With great care, the soldier forced the catch open, and immediately it snapped shut. He forced it open again, only to have the same result. Norik cursed, attempting the catch a third time. This time, it would not even open. Attempting several other resulted in the same frustrating results. Worse, when he tried to at least remove the boots, that, despite the cold, they, like the gauntlets, slid only so far before refusing to give way. Norik tugged harder, but again, with no visible success. Madness. These were only garments, pieces of metal, and a pair of old, if sturdy boots. They had to come off. Norik's desperation rose. He was a common man, a man who believed that the sun rose in the morning and the moon at night. Birds flew and fish swam. People wore clothes, but clothes never wore people. He glared at the bloody palms. No demonic voice arose from around him, telling him of his dark fate. The gauntlets did not suddenly draw words or symbols in the earth. The armor simply would not let go of its new wearer. Scattered images of his companions' gruesome ends once more tumbled about in his thoughts, making it hard for Nork to focus. Nork prayed, pleaded for them to go away, but suspected that they would forever torment him. Yet, if he could never be rid of the nightmares, there still might be something he could do about the cursed suit he wore. Watson had been a sorcerer of some reputation, but even the Bajere had admitted that there were many practitioners more skilled, more knowledgeable than he. Norik would just have to find one of them. He looked east, then west. To the east, he saw nothing but tall and menacing mountains, whereas the west seemed a bit more gentle in scope. True, Norik knew he might be working under false assumptions, but his best hope, he decided, had to be the latter direction. The cold wind and moisture already chilling him to the bone. The weary veteran started off on a tremendous trek. It might be that he would die of exposure before he even made it out of the mountains, but some part of him suspected that such would not be so. Bartek's armor had not seized him simply to let him die in the middle of the wilderness. No, it likely had some other notion in mind, one that would make itself known with time. Nork did not look forward to that revelation at all. The sun vanished into an overcast day, turning the weather even colder. A wetness also hung in the air. Breathing heavily, Nork pushed on despite everything. As of yet, he had not so much as seen a glimpse to a hint that he traveled in the right direction. For all the weary veteran knew, he had headed in the exact opposite of where he should have gone. Some mountain kingdom could have just been past the next peak to the east. Thoughts like that, however frustrating, managed to keep Norik from completely going mad. Each time he let his thoughts wander, they ever returned to the tomb and the horror of which he had been a part. Flotsam and Satan's face haunted him, and every now and then Norik imagined he saw the pair condemning him from this shadow or that, but they were dead, and unlike the bloody warlord, they would stay so. Only Norik's guilt continued to condemn him. Around midday, he began to stumble. It finally occurred to him that he had neither eaten nor drunk since waking up the day before he had last supped early. Unless he planned to fall over soon and die, Norik had to find substance of some sort. But how? He had no weapon, no trap. Water he could find simply by scooping some of the snow, topping the nearby rocks, but actual food looked to be hard to come by. Deciding he could at least assuage his thirst, Nork walked over to a small outcropping where the coolness of the shadows had kept a small bit of snow and ice still unmelted. He scooped up what he could and greedily sucked on it, not caring at all about the bits of dust and grass that came with it. In moments, his head seemed to clear a bit. Spitting out a few fragments of dirt, Nork pondered what to do next. Not once had he seen any wild animal other than a bird, Without a bow or slingshot, he had no chance to bring down one of the creatures, yet he needed food. His left hand suddenly moved without any regard as to his wishes. The fingers separated and bent inward, almost as if now Nor clutched an invisible sphere. The gauntleted hand then turned until the palm faced the landscape just before the stunned soldier. From his lips burst a single word, Jazarat! The ground a few feet ahead buckled. Norik at first thought that a tremor had struck the area, but only a small crevice, perhaps 6 feet by 3, actually formed. The rest of its surroundings did not so much as shiver in the slightest. His nose wrinkled as noxious fumes arose from the minute but apparently deep fissure. The area burned where yellow tendrils of smoke spread. Iskari Wild. The new words came out of his own mouth with great ferocity. From within the fissure came a horrid chattering sound. Nork sought to back up, but his feet would not move. The chattering increased, now a babble of high-pitched animalistic sounds. Norg barely stifled a gasp at the grotesque tusk face thrust itself somewhat unwillingly into the overcast day. A pair of jagged, curved horns rose from the top of the scaly head. Round yellow orbs with blazing red pupils shied away from the sky, finally focusing with clear bitterness on the human. The creature's squat, porcine nose twitched as if smelling something terrible, something that the fighter realized likely was him. Twin sets of three-digited talons seized hold of the sides of the fissure as the horrific beast pushed itself up to the surface. Squat, oversized feet with curved nails planted themselves on the ground. Nork stared down at the thing surely out of the underworld, a vaguely humanoid, hunched back denizen of the depths who, while barely reaching his waist, revealed surprising muscle under skin both scaled and furred. And then a second of the creature joined the first. He immediately followed by a third, a fourth, a fifth. The frightful pack ceased growing in numbers after the sixth. A half a dozen more than Nork certainly desired. The demonic imps chattered in their incomprehensible language, obviously upset with being here and very clear upon who they blamed this entire situation. A few opened toothy maws and hissed at Nork, while others simply scowled. Gaster Iskari. Strange words once more startled him, but their effect on the monstrous pack proved even more astonishing. All signs of defiance faded abruptly as the imps groveled before him, some fairly burying themselves in the ground to prove how lowly they were. Norik Viseran has become a living nightmare. While on a quest to find magical treasure, the Soldier of Fortune discovers an artifact beyond his wildest dreams. The ancient armor of Bartek, the legendary warlord of blood. But the mysterious armor is cursed, channeling a malevolent power into Norik's tortured soul. Now pursued by demons who covet the dark armor for their own devices, Norik must overcome a bloodlust he can scarcely control and learn the truth about his terrifying curse before he's lost the darkness forever.
This should have never have happened. By the will of Rothma, this should have never happened.
The emerald sphere that she had entered earlier in order to see gave the entire tableau an even more unsettling appearance. Her face, already pale in color, paled further. Kara pulled her lengthy black cloak about her, taking some comfort from its warmth. Under thick lashes, silver almond-shaped eyes surveyed a scene that her masters surely could have never have envisioned. The tomb is forever safe, they had always insisted. Where Vajra'i elemental sorcery falters, our own trusted skills will make the difference. But now, both the more materialistic Vajra'i and the pragmatic followers of Rathma had apparently failed in their trust. That which they had sought to forever bury from the sight of men had not only been discovered, but had actually been stolen. Or was there more to it? How powerful could the intruders have been to not only eliminate the undead guardians, but also shatter the unbreakable wards? Not so powerful that two of them had not died in very violent fashion, moving with such grace that she seemed almost to glide. The black-clad woman went to the nearest of the corpses. Kara leaned down and, after pushing back several tresses of lengthy, raven-colored hair, inspected the remains. A wiry man, a battle-scar war veteran from one of the distant western lands. Not a pleasant-looking man, even before someone had completely twisted his head around and nearly torn off his arm. The dagger in his chest, surely an exercise in excess, looked to be his own, which had killed him. Even the necromancer could not say, "Not yet." The gaping wound had bled well, but not as much as it normally should have. Yet, why cut the victim open after snapping his neck? As silent as death, the slim but curvaceous young woman made her way to the other body. This one she immediately recognized as a Vajra'i, which did not surprise her in the least. Always meddling, always seeking methods by which to gain an advantage over one another. The Vajra'i made untrustworthy allies at best. If not for them, this entire situation would have never have occurred. Bartek and his brother had followed the early teachings of the Bajari, especially their reckless use of demons for more powerful spells of sorcery. Bartek had especially exceeded in that respect, but his constant interactions with the Dark Ones had twisted his own thinking, making him believe that demons were his allies. They, in turn, had fed off his growing evil, kindred spirits from both the mortal and the infernal planes. And although Horizon and his fellow mages had slain Bartek and defeated his demon host, they had found it impossible to destroy the warlord's very corpse. The armor, known to bear several sinister enchantments, had continued to try to serve its function, protecting its master even in death. Only the fact that Bartek had failed to cover his throat properly had even allowed his foes to decapitate the villain in the first place. Left with a head and torso that they could not readily burn, the Vajra'i had come to Kara's own people, searching the dense jungles for the reclusive practitioners of sorcery that balanced life and death, a sorcery that caused their wielders to be branded necromancer. Together, the two diverse orders worked hard to make certain that Bartek's remains forever vanished from the face of the world, hopefully even the warlord's enchantments fading to nothing with time. Kara touched the crimson-soaked throat of the dead sorcerer, noting how most of it had been ripped away with a savageness beyond that of most animals. Unlike the fighter, the mage had died very quickly, if still brutally. His eyes stared up at her, though horror of what had happened to him still evident. His expression remained a mix of shock and disbelief, almost almost as if he could not believe who his murderer had been. Yet, how could some force slay a Vajeri and still fail to stop the other thieves? Had they just been fortunate, barely escaping? Kara frowned. With the undead guardians gone and the wards shattered, what had remained that could have hunted the intruders? What? She wished the others had come with her, but that had not been possible. They had been needed elsewhere, everywhere it seemed. A general ground swelling of forces so very dark had been sensed not only throughout Kyrgyzstan, but also Skosglen. The faithful of Rothman had been spread thinner than in any period in their existence, and that left only her, one of the youngest and less tested of her faith. True, like most of those who followed the path of Rothman, she had been trained to be independent almost from birth. But now Kara felt she entered territory for which no amount of teaching or experience could have prepared her. Perhaps, perhaps, though, this Vajra could still teach her something about what she now faced. From her belt, Kara removed a delicate-looking but highly resilient dagger, the blade of which had been fashioned in a back-and-forth serpentine manner. Both the blade and the handle had been carved from the purest ivory, but there again appearances deceived. Kara would have willingly pitted her own knife against any other, knowing full well that the enchantments placed on it made it stronger and more accurate than most normal weapons. With neither a distaste nor eagerness, the necromancer touched the point to one of the bloodiest graves on the dead Vajera's ravaged throat. She turned the blade over and over until the tip had been completely severed. Then, holding the dagger hilt down, Kara muttered her spell. The deep red splotches on the tip flared brightly. She muttered a few more words, concentrating. The splotches began to change, to grow. They moved as if alive, or remembering life. Kara, called Night Shadow by her teachers, flipped the dagger over, then thrust the point into the floor. The blank sank in halfway, not at all impeded by the hard rock surface. Stepping back quickly, Carl watched as the ivory dagger became engulfed by the swelling splotches, which then melted together, creating a vaguely human form, little taller than a weapon. Drawing the patterns in the air, the necromancer uttered the second and final part of her incantation. In a blaze of red light, a full-size figure materialized where the ivory dagger had stood, completely crimson from head to toe, skin to garments. He stared at her with vacant eyes. He wore the clothes of a Bajari sorcerer, the same clothes, in fact, that the corpse on the floor behind him wore. Kara eagerly beheld the phantasm bearing the likeness of the dead mage. She had done this only once before, and under conditions much more favorable. What stood before her most mortals would have called a ghost, a spirit, but in doing so, they would have been only partially correct. Drawn forth from the life's blood's victim, it indeed bore some traces of the dead spirit, but to fully summon a true specter would have taken more time and trouble, and Kara had to act in haste now. This phantasm would surely serve to answer her questions.
Name yourself.
She demanded. The mouth moved, but no sound came from it. Nonetheless, it answered, formed in her mind.
What happened here?
Phantasm stared, but did not answer. Kara cursed herself for a fool, realizing that it could only answer questions in a simple way. Taking a breath, she asked,
Who destroyed the rest?
the name meant nothing to her.
The Vajara? The sorcerer?
To her surprise, the spectral form shook his crimson head ever so slightly. Name again, the last part, Vizeran, meant servant of the Bajara in the old tongue, but that information helped Kara little. This path led her nowhere. She turned to a different and far more important subject.
Did this Nork take the armor from the dais?
And again the phantasm shook his head ever so slightly. Kara frowned, recalling nothing in her teachings mentioning this. Perhaps Vajera made for more unusual summonings. She pondered her next question with care, with the limitations of the phantasm. The necromancer realized that she could spend all day and night asking, and yet still receive no knowledge of value to her mission. Kara would have to. A sound came from the passage behind her. The young enchantress whirled about. For just the briefest of moments, she thought she saw a slight bluish light deep within, but it vanished so quickly that Kara had to wonder if she had imagined it. It could have simply been a glow bug of some insect, but cautiously approaching the tunnel, Kara warily peered into the darkness. Had she been too hasty in heading directly to the main chamber? Could this Norg have been hiding outside, waiting for someone to come? Absurd, but Kara had heard a noise. Of that, she felt certain. And at that moment, she heard it again, this time much farther into the passage. Muttering a spell, Kara formed a second emerald sphere, which she immediately sent fluttering down the corridor. As it darted along, the dark-haired woman followed after her for a few steps, trying to make out what she could. Still no sign of another intruder, but Kara could not take a chance. Anyone who could so readily slay a Vajra certainly offered deadly threat. She could not simply ignore the possibility. Taking a deep breath, the necromancer stared down the rocky passage and froze a moment later, swearing at herself for her carelessness. Kara had left her prized dagger behind, and she dared not face a possible foe without it. Not only did it provide her with protection, both in the mundane and magical sense, But by leaving it behind, the dark mage even risked possibly losing it to whomever might be stalking the tomb. She quickly stepped back into the chamber, already preparing her mind and the spell to dismiss the phantasm, only to find that the crimson figure had already vanished. Kara managed but one more step before a further realization struck her just as hard. With the phantasm had vanished, her precious dagger, yet that alone did not leave her now wide-eyed and unable to even speak. Both the body of the sorcerer Boston and his slider companion had also disappeared.